You're 58 years old. You wake up Monday morning, get in your car, drive to a job you've been doing for 22 years, and somewhere between the coffee machine and your desk, you do the math. Again, the same math you've been doing in your head for the last 3 years. If I retire at 65, I'll have... And then you stop yourself because you already know what the number looks like, and it doesn't look like retirement. It looks like panic. Now, picture someone else. Same age, same neighborhood, maybe even the same street. They wake up Monday morning too, but they don't do the math because they already know what it says. They started a different kind of math a decade ago, and that math, it's been working for them ever since. The difference between those two people is not income, it's not luck, it's not some inheritance nobody told you about, it's psychology. And I want to show you exactly how it works, because the gap between those two outcomes doesn't happen at 65. It happens right now, in your 50s, in decisions that feel small but are absolutely not small. My name is Nate, and today we're going to break down the psychology of people who actually prepare for retirement in their 50s, what they do differently in their heads, how it changes their behavior, and most importantly, how it shapes the rest of their life in ways that go far beyond just money. If you've ever wanted to understand the invisible line between people who retire with dignity and people who don't, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a like if it ends up helping you see things differently. Let's start with a number that I don't think gets nearly enough attention. 1 in 5 Americans over the age of 50 have $0 saved for retirement. Not a little, not enough. Zero. According to a 2024 AARP survey, 20% of people in their 50s and beyond are going to reach retirement age with nothing but Social Security to catch them. And Social Security, by the way, pays an average of $2,008 per month as of 2025. That's $24,000 a year before taxes for the rest of your life. But it gets worse when you zoom out. A Go Banking Rates survey found that 28% of all Americans across every age group have $0 saved for retirement, and 30% believe they will simply never be able to retire at all. Not that they'll retire late, not that they'll have to cut back. Never. They've already accepted it. Now, here's what's interesting, and this is where the psychology starts. Those numbers don't describe people who are lazy or irresponsible or didn't try hard enough. These are people who got hit by the same behavioral traps that hit almost everyone. They just never had anyone explain how the trap actually works. So let's talk about the trap. There's a concept in behavioral economics called present bias, and it sounds academic, but it is the single most destructive financial force in most people's lives, including yours probably. Present bias is essentially your brain's preference for right now over later. And it's not a flaw in your character, it's literally how human brains are wired. We evolved to prioritize immediate threats and immediate rewards. A retirement at 67 feels to your brain like it's almost irrelevant compared to the vacation you could take right now, or the kitchen renovation, or just not feeling financially squeezed this month. Research quantified this. In a national survey of 2,450 adults, present bias was found in 64% of respondents. And here's the part that should stop you cold. It cut annual retirement savings by approximately 4.2% every year. That might sound small. It is not small. Over a decade, that's nearly 42% of potential contributions that just evaporated because your brain decided that later is someone else's problem. And it gets layered. On top of present bias, you've got loss aversion, the psychological quirk that makes losing $1,000 feel about twice as painful as gaining $1,000 feels good. For 72% of people, this shows up as an avoidance of investment risk. They keep cash and savings accounts that barely keep up with inflation because the idea of watching numbers go down on a screen is psychologically unbearable, even if staying in cash is mathematically guaranteed to make them worse off long term. And then there's optimism bias. 68% of Americans underestimate how much they'll need in retirement. They assume they'll spend less, stay healthier, and live shorter than they statistically will. So they delay, not because they're dumb, because they're human. Here's what's brutal about all of this. These biases don't respond to logic. You can know all of this, intellectually understand every word I just said, and still feel the pull of, I'll deal with it later, because the biases aren't in your thinking brain. They're deeper than that. The people who actually prepare for retirement in their 50s have figured out, consciously or not, how to work around that wiring. And the way they do it is not what most people expect. Let me walk you through what separates them. The first thing they do differently is they stop making retirement abstract. Most unprepared people think about retirement as a concept, a future state, something that will happen eventually. Prepared people treat it like a specific scene they can almost see. They know what city they're living in. They know what they're doing on a Tuesday afternoon. They've connected emotionally with who they're going to be at 72, not just financially. This sounds soft? It's not. Researchers actually tested this. In one experiment, they showed people age-progressed photos of themselves, what they'd look like as elderly adults, and then offered them the option to increase voluntary retirement contributions. The group that saw their older selves boosted their contributions by 6.8%, not because the math changed, because their future selves stopped feeling like a stranger. The second thing prepared people do is they build identity around being someone who saves, not someone who is trying to save. That distinction is massive. Trying implies temporary. Identity implies permanent. The people who hit retirement with real security aren't white-knuckling their way through budgets. They've redefined who they are in relation to money. And once that shift happens, financial decisions get easier, not harder. The third thing, and this might surprise you, is they automate everything they possibly can. Not because they're disciplined, because they've accepted that willpower is not a retirement strategy. Studies show that automatic involvement in retirement plans increases participation by 41%, not because the plan got better, because they removed the human decision from the equation. Prepared 50-somethings do this deliberately. They set contribution escalations to happen automatically. They rebalance automatically. They treat their future self like a bill that gets paid first, before they ever touch what's left. Now, let me show you what the data says actually happens to these two groups of people later. The Federal Reserve ran the numbers on retirees and their financial well-being. 82% of all retirees say they feel okay or comfortable financially. That sounds decent until you break it down. Among retirees who have some source of private income, a pension, investment income, a side business, 85% feel comfortable. But among retirees whose only income is Social Security, only 54% feel okay. That's not a small gap. That's the difference between a retirement that feels like freedom and one that feels like managed survival. And here's what the financial well-being numbers don't show you. The mental health data underneath them. 53% of Americans over 50 report feeling significant financial stress in the past year. And this stress doesn't stay in a box labeled money stress. It bleeds into everything: sleep, physical health, relationships. A University of Michigan study found that adults aged 50 to 64 cut back on spending more aggressively than adults 65 and older, meaning the years right before retirement are often the most financially stressful years of people's lives. The period where they should be building confidence, they're hemorrhaging it. Meanwhile, the Harvard study of adult development, 85 years of tracking human lives, found that the quality of your relationships in later life is at least as important to longevity and happiness as for financial security. People who retire with a plan aren't just wealthier. They're less anxious, less isolated, more present with the people they love. Because financial stress is a thief. It steals your attention, your patience, and your ability to enjoy the life you've worked for. And what really shapes whether you end up in that 85% or that 54%, it comes down to decisions made right here, in your 50s, specifically in a window that most people dramatically underestimate. Let me walk you through the actual milestones in this decade because they are real and they matter. At 50, something that most people know about but statistically most don't use, catch-up contributions kick in. As of 2025, if you're 50 or older, you can contribute an extra $7,500 per year to a 401k beyond the standard limit. That is not a trivial number. Over 10 years at average market returns, that single move alone can add 6 figures to your retirement balance. Most people file this fact away and do nothing with it. At 55, the rule of 55. If you leave your job at 55 or older, you can withdraw from that specific employer's 401k without the standard 10% early withdrawal penalty. This is a legitimate bridge if you need income before 59 and a half. Most people don't know it exists. At 69 and a half, penalty-free access to all retirement accounts, IRAs, 401ks, everything. This is the date where the full arsenal becomes available, and the best prepared people have been building toward it for a decade. Between 60 and 63, Secure 2.0, legislation passed in 2022, introduced what they call super catch-up contributions, even higher limits than the standard 50-plus catch-ups. The government literally created an accelerated runway for people who are behind in this specific window. Most people who need it most have no idea it exists. At 62, Social Security becomes available, but at a permanently reduced benefit. Claiming early sounds attractive until you run the math on what delaying costs you monthly for the rest of your life. Prepared 50-somethings have this conversation with themselves and often a financial advisor years before the decision arrives. Unprepared ones make it under pressure, reactively, and often regret it. And at 65, Medicare eligibility. Healthcare in America costs more than most people's mortgage in retirement. Having a plan for this, not just hoping for the best, is the difference between a budget that works and one that quietly collapses. These milestones exist. They're real. But here's the problem, and this is where psychology comes back in. Knowing about them doesn't mean using them. The research shows that even financially literate people fail to act on these options unless they've specifically built the identity and the systems around doing so. Knowledge without behavior is just expensive trivia. So what does all of this mean for you? If you're in your 50s right now and you feel behind and 61% of Americans over 50 worry they won't have enough, I need to tell you something directly. The gap between where you are and where you want to be is real, but it is not fixed. The people who prepare in their 50s aren't special. They're not smarter than you. They didn't get a head start that you didn't get. What they did was confront the psychology, that present bias, the avoidance, the vague hope that it'll somehow work out, and replace it with something specific, a number, a timeline, a plan that gets automated so it happens whether or not they feel like dealing with it on a given Tuesday. And here's the thing that nobody talks about. The people who do this, the ones who build that plan in their 50s and actually execute it, they don't just end up wealthier, they end up different. They carry themselves differently at work. They make decisions from a completely different position because when you know your future is handled, even partially, even imperfectly, the present opens up in ways that are hard to describe until you felt it. The ones who don't, some of them make it work on Social Security alone. Some don't. But almost all of them share one thing. They wish they'd taken this window, their 50s, more seriously. Not because they didn't care, because the trap was invisible and nobody showed them how it worked. Now you know. What you do with that is up to you.